I'm Aaron Porras, and thanks for joining us from our studios in Israel. Coming up in today's newscast, Israel installs new security measures at the Temple Mount following the weekend terror attacks. Prime Minister Netanyahu makes some waves during his visit to France, and Israelis once again turn the world of water technology on its head. Stay tuned for the latest news in Israel. Saturday, a Palestinian man from the village of Nabi Saleh lightly wounded a resident from the neighboring village of Beitin in a drive-by shooting attack. But that wasn't enough for Amar Ahmed Khalil, who followed his drive-by with an attack on an IDF post in the area. After the attack, Khalil fled the scene, but the Israeli Shin Bet intelligence service was already figuring out his identity. IDF forces and an elite counter-terrorist unit started searching the area for the assailant, but when they found him, Khalil opened fire. Israeli teams responded with return fire, and Khalil was killed in the action. Another man who was with Khalil at the firefight has been detained by security forces in connection with this Saturday attack. Immediately following Friday's terror attacks that left 2 Israeli police officers dead, Israeli officials closed down access to the Temple Mount compound for the first time since 1969. Washington is backing the temporary closure, urging Muslims to be patient until the site is reopened gradually today. A White House statement said that the United States strongly condemns the terror attack and that, quote, the attack forced the government of Israel to temporarily close the Temple Mount/Haram al-Sharif to conduct its investigation, a decision the United States applauds and welcomes, end quote. On the other hand, the move is infuriating Jordanian Waqf officials who have traditionally overseen the grounds of the Temple Mount. The chief mufti of Jerusalem said, quote, we reject all the measures that Israel is taking, and we warn against any harm to Al-Aqsa, end quote. The Waqf head went on to accuse Israel's security forces of doing whatever they want there, defiling and destroying, and that they have no more control of the grounds. In Amman, nearly 1,000 Jordanians marched in protest of Israel as well. On Saturday night, in a phone conversation with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, King Abdullah II of Jordan condemned Friday's terror attack that claimed the lives of 2 Israeli police officers right before demanding the Temple Mount compound be reopened immediately. After reviewing the situation with various security groups and ministers, Netanyahu has promised to reopen the Temple Mount and the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound gradually, starting today. According to Netanyahu, however, new security measures will be in place.
והערב קיימתי דיון עם צמרת הביטחון, הצמרת של גורמי הביטחון, והנחיתי להציב מגנומטרים בשערים שדרכם נכנסים להר הבית. אנחנו מציבים גם מצלמות על תרנים מחוץ להר הבית, אבל הם נותנים שליטה כמעט מלאה על כל מה שנעשה שם. החלטתי שהחל ממחר, במסגרת המדיניות שלנו לשמור על הסטטוס קוו, אנחנו נפתח את הר הבית בהדרגה, אבל עם אמצעי ביטחון מוגברים.
Following the Israeli investigation into Friday's terror attack, Netanyahu also temporarily restricted non-residents' access to Jerusalem's Old City over the weekend and set up roadblocks and checkpoints. 3 Waqf officials have also been detained on suspicion of aiding and/or otherwise inciting the attackers. The Jordanian Muslim Waqf, or a similar Muslim organization, has overseen the compound since around 1187. During the Muslim reconquest of the Kingdom of Jerusalem. It was then reinstituted as a sign of goodwill by the Israeli government in 1967 after recapturing the city. Jewish prayer at the site has nearly consistently been banned, though, and Waqf members have on many occasions been involved in incidents of suppressive tactics and rhetoric against Jews and Israelis before. Joining me now in the studio to explore the ongoing situation on the Temple Mount, or Haram al-Sharif compound, is Dr. Shaul Shai, the Director of Research at the Institute for Policy and Strategy at IDC Herzliya. Thank you so much for coming in. So my first question for you is, how will these new security measures affect the status quo on the Temple Mount?
I think that, first of all, Israel is committed to maintain the status quo. And at the same time, after the last terror attack, it's necessary to take all the security measures in order to improve the security on Mount Temple and to prevent any future attacks against Jews or Muslims in this holy area. So I believe that in the long term, the status quo will be maintained and the calm will return quite soon, I hope.
So between all the new security measures, you have the metal detectors and the new cameras. Is that going to affect, prayer at the site? Is that going to have an effect or repercussions from the Waqf kind of, taking some sort of action against Jews or visitors or people who come there?
I think that we have to put the distinction between the security measures and the fact that both Muslims and Jews has to come to this holy place, which is holy to both religions, and to be free to pray and to stay there. But in order to enable to do it in a safe way, there is no other option after the last attack than to take all these security measures. And I don't think that it will affect in any way, let's say, the freedom of any religion to use this place.
So why then would the Jordanian officials and the Waqf have such an issue with installing such measures? For example, just a few months ago, there was the idea to install 24/7 cameras around the clock at all points of the compound, and they had a fit. They said absolutely not. So, why would they be so against that if it doesn't really affect them?
I think that it's more political question than a practical one, because I think that it's a common interest for everybody, Jews and Muslims as well, to protect this place. I would like to mention that just 2 weeks ago in Saudi Arabia, the local security forces foiled an attack to carry out a suicide bombing in Mecca, in the holiest place for the Muslims in Saudi Arabia. So I think that the problem is that the radical Islamic terrorists are creating the threat over the holiest Muslim places. And it's necessary to join forces, Israel, Jordan, Palestinian authorities, Waqf, in order to prevent it. I think that this is the common interest.
All right, now follow up to something that the Grand Mufti said of Jerusalem. He was accusing Israel of taking over more control away from the Jordanians and kind of having more Israeli oversight. Is that the case? Has that ever been the case? And if it is, or if it isn't for that matter, why doesn't Israel take over control?
Because Israel, as I said before, is committed to the status quo. It's agreed between Israel and Jordan, Israel and the Waqf, and Israel is not violating any previous agreement. So again, I think that this kind of declarations are mainly political and in this case, not true.
Okay, now three Waqf officials who were working at the Temple Mount have been detained for questioning on suspicion of being connected to the attack, allowing them to harbor weapons at the compound overnight, etc. What is a deterrent that can be enforced to prevent that sort of aid to terror, especially from a government official or from a...
I think that first of all, it's the interest of the Waqf and the leadership of the Israeli Arabs. And Abu Mazen already called for the Palestinians not to use arms in the holiest place. So first of all, I think that it's the responsibility of the Muslim leadership, local and global. It's not a matter of deterrence. Mm-hmm. I mean, the question is to convince people that the holiest places, no matter if it's Muslim or Jews or Christian, is out of this game.
All right. Well, on that note, unfortunately, that's all the time we have. Thank you so much for coming in, Dr. Shoshai.
My pleasure.
All right. For better or worse, it's not all security and economic issues in the Knesset. The members of the Israeli parliament also get into heated arguments over social issues. At a recent meeting, Knesset member Yoav Kish said that malicious practices from divorce attorneys are leading to the shockingly high rates of suicide among divorced fathers. Likud MK Yoav Kish told the Knesset Special Committee for Distributive Justice and Social Equality that the current situation in divorce courts is absurd and against the law. Currently, Kish says it's common practice for lawyers to tell their female clients seeking divorce to claim that their husbands have hit them or harmed the children, even when there is no truth to the allegations. Along with that, he says there are no repercussions for false claims, even though the husbands can be imprisoned or lose visitation rights for up to a year and a half over the allegations. Divorced men in Israel commit suicide 7 times more frequently than their married counterparts, and Kish says it's because they're not allowed to see their children, because the authorities are putting perfectly normal, perfectly good men in jail. Fellow Likud MK Yehuda Glick says that a relative of his committed suicide after going through a divorce as well, but plans from Likud members to conduct investigations into the subject of suicide among divorced men have been stalled by lack of support from other factions in the Knesset. Now, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has taken off to Europe this week for a series of meetings with the leaders of France and Hungary. It will be his first meeting with the new French President Emmanuel Macron and the first visit by an Israeli Prime Minister to Hungary since the fall of communism. As always, though, Netanyahu's trip is not without controversy. TV's Max Keisler is here with more. Max, tell me, what is the big deal about the Prime Minister's trip?
Well, basically, the Jewish community of Hungary wanted Netanyahu to cancel this trip. Recently, the Prime Minister of Hungary made a speech where he had a lot of praise for the leader of Hungary during World War II, and that's someone who oversaw the deportation of 500,000 Jews to the death camps. Then there's this ad campaign right now featuring George Soros that a lot of Hungarian Jews are saying is anti-Semitic. So for all these reasons, they didn't want Netanyahu to reward Hungary with a visit.
All right, so then, why wouldn't he cancel his visit then?
Well, if Israel canceled visits to every country that denies its role or downplays its role in the Holocaust, that would be a lot of Europe. Israel, they want to keep good relations with various countries. It could be Turkey, it could be the Ukraine, a lot of problematic countries. Hungary, they might be anti-Semitic, but they also have good, strong trade ties and diplomatic ties with Israel. So Netanyahu chose to be pragmatic.
All right, well, let's check out your interview.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's 4-day visit to Hungary is drawing criticism from the local Jewish community. Many Jewish leaders are saying he should have canceled his visit after Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban made a speech in praise of Miklos Horthy, the Hungarian leader in World War II, who allied with the Nazis and facilitated the murder of 500,000 Hungarian Jews. The Hungarian foreign minister spoke on the phone with Israel's ambassador to Hungary afterwards, clarifying that there were, quote, very negative periods and historical transgressions during Horthy's time in power. Israel is accepting that as an explanation. Along with that, recent billboards in Hungary attacking billionaire activist George Soros have been interpreted by many as subtextually anti-Semitic. But considering how Soros funds organizations that support BDS and delegitimize the state of Israel, it's not surprising that the Israeli Foreign Ministry didn't leap to his defense. Aside from his meeting with the Hungarian Prime Minister, Netanyahu will also be sitting down in Budapest with the leaders of the Czech Republic, Poland, and Slovakia. And there's some serious money on the table. Bilateral trade between Israel and Hungary exceeds $500 million a year.
Ahead of his arrival in Hungary tomorrow, today the Israeli Prime Minister is in France to attend an event commemorating the roundup of 13,000 French Jews during World War II. TV's Max Keisler is here with us still. Max, what is going on in Paris?
Well, Netanyahu is here for the commemorative ceremony, but he's also here to meet with President Macron, and this is just a week or two after he met with President Mahmoud Abbas.
All right. I mean, there are some reports, though, that Macron is supposedly more pro-Israel than his predecessor. Is that true?
It certainly seems like a possibility. I mean, we saw some very strong language from Macron today that anti-Zionism is a new form of anti-Semitism. I'm sure that made a lot of people in Israel very happy. Then, his emphasis on trade, on cybersecurity, this can all lead to closer relations with Israel.
All right. Well, I can't wait to hear some more.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu attended a commemorative service today for the 13,000 French Jews who were rounded up and deported to death camps 75 years ago. In his remarks, Netanyahu condemned the Vichy France regime for collaborating with the Nazis and betraying French values.
They shattered the lives of thousands of French Jews at Veldiv. It seems that the values of the French Revolution, liberty, equality, fraternity, these values were crushed brutally under the boot of anti-Semitism.
Along with that, He told French Prime Minister Emmanuel Macron and the French people that Israel will stand with them in their struggle against militant Islam. Macron, for his part, expressed his own regrets over the collaborationist actions of the Vichy regime and pledged that France will not accept anti-Israel or anti-Zionist calls in the future, calling them, quote, a new form of anti-Semitism. Later, the two leaders met at the Élysée, the residence of the French president, to discuss a variety of different issues.
So it is that time of the year again. The Jerusalem Film Festival is back, and over the next week, 180 films from both established and independent creators from all over the world will be available for your viewing pleasure. Just check out the trailer to this up-and-coming film called Family, or Mishpacha, and I'm sure all you film buffs out there will start salivating. Joining me now in the studio to tell us more about the Jerusalem Film Festival is Ron Fogel, a film critic and lecturer. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
So let's start with the film we just saw. That was called Mishpacha, and there's a lot going on in that trailer. What can you tell us about the film?
Well, this is the third feature by Roni Kedar, who is called now the queen of independent Israeli cinema, you can say.
All right.
And she always goes around telling dark comedies, dark stories. This is the story about a girl who actually murders her whole family and then wants to talk about it with her shrink. So this is a strange opening to the film. It's not for everyone's taste, but this is a good example of the variety of Israeli cinema nowadays. You have hits like, I won't say so of blockbusters, and you have independent cinema, and you have female directors, which is something quite new in the Israeli film scene.
Okay.
And Roni Kedar is a good example of this new wave of Israeli female directors and Israeli independent cinema, which is quite popular and very successful in the 21st century.
So you're talking about you know, this success of independent cinema in Israel. Are we going to be seeing a lot of Israeli directors at the Jerusalem Film Festival, or is it a real mix?
Well, there are 7 films in the Israeli competition, which is a short chapter of all the 100 films, as you have mentioned. And there are some documentary Israeli films, but most of the focus is about the international scene in the festival. There is a retrospective for the French film director Jean-Pierre Malville. There is the new Sofia Coppola film with Nicole Kidman, Be Gilded, and the movie 1945, which is in East European, Western, and all sorts of interesting
There's something
films.
for everybody.
Yes.
There's absolutely something for everybody.
Yes.
So I see, okay, right now I see clips from a different film.
Scaffolding.
Scaffolding.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about that.
I tell you, Scaffolding, I saw the world premiere of this Israeli film by Matan Yair in the Cannes Film Festival last month. It's one of the best films I saw in the festival.
Really?
Not only Israeli, but international.
This is a Cannes?
Yes.
All right.
Matan Yair is actually a school teacher, and the leading actor, Asher, who plays a guy who works in his father's construction company, is actually a construction worker with his father's company.
No kidding.
So it's a real story with non-actors, which is also always makes the film very authentic.
Sure. Is the storyline true to life as well, then, or is
it's
it
almost autobiographical by the director?
Wow.
I interviewed him in Cannes, and he said it's almost his life story. He didn't feel sure until death if he should play the teacher, and he decided to give it to Ami Smolarchik. But Asher, who's a non-actor, is the real surprise of the film. He really puts out a great performance. He's a troubled kid in high school, that's his part. He gets with some sort of relations with his teacher, who understand that in Asher there is more than meets the eye. And then something happens with the teacher, and Asher is very frustrated and he doesn't find comfort in his work or his father or his friends. It's a very interesting story.
So, I mean, this sounds like we're having kind of like this renaissance of Israeli film at the moment.
You can say the 21st century is the renaissance of Israeli film with an emphasis of the individual, not about the big issues, the country, the sikhsukh and everything, but about local subject and people in their own environment. Which I think
is almost relatable to a wider audience, really.
Usually, yes.
Usually, typically.
Yes.
All right, well, I can't wait to see these films and pretty much anything else that I have time for at the Jerusalem Festival. Thank you so much for coming in, Ron
Thank
Fogel.
you very much.
Thank you. All right, speaking of movies, a Canadian Jewish filmmaker who's making a documentary on the anti-Zionist Pink Floyd band member Roger Waters says that the industry is now shunning his new project. Ian Halperin has been making films about celebrities like the Kardashian family and Michael Jackson for years, but now he's turning his attention to a Jewish cause. Halperin was informed by the director of ISGAP, an anti-Semitism monitoring group, about Waters' distasteful rhetoric, and what Halperin's found since his research has started is upsetting. He says he's interviewed musicians who've worked with Waters who say that the rock star has been anti-Jewish for more than 25 years. But that's not the only thing that's alarming the director. He's finding also that the media likes to avoid this topic. Halperin says that his documentary on Brangelina was covered in around 3,000 articles when it was announced, but Wish You Weren't Here, as the film is called, is receiving essentially no mainstream media coverage. Some editors have told him the subject is too small, but Halperin's not buying it. He says that Waters has the highest-grossing Oslo tour of all time, and he's worried that the mainstream media's silence on Waters is equally motivated by anti-Semitic sentiments. A new Israeli startup says that they have a way to revolutionize the fish breeding process, which could make the tilapia or sea bream on your dinner plate a lot more environmentally friendly. Current fish farming technology uses a lot of energy to replace the seawater in breeding tanks 5 times a day, according to Latimiria CEO Eitan Sessler. And the seawater itself has plenty of impurities from parasites to viruses. So Sessler has a solution: cut out the seawater. Latimiria's got a new water ring process that involves desalinating regular agricultural water, adding marine salt to resalinate it, and then placing the water back in special tanks. Baby fish or fingerlings can then be bred and raised in the water rings and at a lower environmental cost. Sessler says that only 0.8% of the water in the water ring is replaced daily, and that's all it takes to get rid of the impurities and waste generated by the fingerlings. He says an average family in Israel consumes more water in a day than one of their water ring systems does in a whole week. Now, mid-heat wave, more than 60,000 fans still gathered together last night to watch music legends Guns N' Roses rock out hard in Tel Aviv's Hayakon Park for a crazy 3 hours. ILTV's Emmanuel Kadosh reports.
Lead singer Axl Rose spent the majority of the continuous 3 hours dashing across the stage and tossing the microphone stand, reminding people how and why he's been one of the kings of rock for 3+ decades. This got a bit too crazy when 27-year-old woman just couldn't contain herself. The woman slipped and fell while attempting to climb on stage to, I guess, get a closer look. Yet in no shock due to the heat wave, she was not the only one to be treated in the massive event. Magen David Adom paramedics treated around 65 people during the concert who suffered from fainting, dehydration, weakness, or bruising from all the jumping, then falling, then jumping again. Regardless of the fact that the Guns N' Roses show was the largest concert to date here in the Holy Land, the Not in a Lifetime tour is also the highest grossing tour this year, pulling in over $151 million in the first 6 months of 2017, as well as beating out Justin Bieber and U2. Now that's impressive. I'm sure this one will be a concert we'll hear about for years to come.
Enroll in eTeacher's online Hebrew courses and quickly discover that it creates the deepest connection to Israel that you could ever imagine. And now for our Hebrew word of the day. Whether you're a perfectly groomed hipster in Tel Aviv or a wise old rabbi in Bnei Brak, a lot of Israelis have beards. So our word today is zakan, meaning beard. Sometimes a zakan is black and short on the sides or gray and down to your chest, but it's a zakan nonetheless. In some circles, your zakan can even be a mighty status symbol, while for many others, you just look really dirty. Whatever the situation, just remember that if you're going to grow a zakan, keep it clean. Nobody likes a guy with week-old spaghetti on his face. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the weather forecast. Tonight will be clear to partly cloudy with a low of 77 or 25 degrees Celsius. Tomorrow you can expect a slight drop in temperatures to a high of 91 or 33 degrees Celsius. But it will still be unseasonably hot and humid, so keep that water close by. All right, that's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.56 shekels to the American dollar. Remember to sign up for our daily newsletter at iltv.tv. I'm Aaron Porras, and thanks for watching.